Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I am speaking with Kristin from the podcast Holidays After Dark. Hey Kristin, thanks for speaking with me today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
How is everything?
Yeah, busy springtime. I feel like the warmer it gets in the year, usually the busier I am, which is good, especially when I'm longing for the holidays past, because the Halloween and Christmas seasons are my favorite, and the rest of the year is kind of just a placeholder until that time again. So yeah, I like to stay busy the rest of the year, but yeah, it's getting warmer and podcast business as usual.
You've beaten me to the crunch there. I was about to say that you've got a long way until your two favourite holiday seasons, which are Halloween and Christmas.
Yeah, it's unfortunately long, but it'll be here before I know it. And I do enjoy diving into the more like not necessarily obscure, but the smaller holidays that happen like in the spring and summer, because I have found that I've learned a lot about those holidays through researching them more. Because prior to the podcast, like, some things like Memorial Day or even Mother's Day or Father's Day, I never really considered the history of those days. I just grew up with them in my world and, did our traditions or whatever, but didn't really look into it further. So it's a good opportunity and excuse to actually dive into some holidays that I brushed off in a previous life.
Well, before we touch on that, I'm guessing that you're a fan of A Nightmare Before Christmas then, because that's the perfect film, because it can either be a Halloween film or a Christmas film. You can keep going back to it for that period.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of my favorite movies. I had a cat who was alive for almost 14 years, and her name was Jack, after Jack Skellington. And yeah, you kind of nailed it as to why I love that movie, because it spans into both holidays. I know people always ask, like, is it a Halloween movie? Is it a Christmas movie? I like to say that it's both. And then I do watch it for both holiday seasons. So it's like double the fun. So why stick it in one category when you can just have it for both holidays? But I absolutely love the style. I love the story. I love the music. I love everything about it. So you nailed it.
As a fan of musicals, it's great. It's fantastic. In passing, I'll just say, I don't know why, but you mentioned the cat, and that reminded me of, I had as a guest the artist Todd Purse. I don't know if you know him, but he does a show called Create Magic, and he talks about the artwork that he creates every day. So he does a podcast every day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. Wow. Hey, wow.
That's dedication.
But he was saying to me, and he said on one of his shows, that one of his sons, Teddy, he, before he was born or something, I can't remember the story completely, but before he was born, they owned a cat who passed away before Teddy was born. And then a few years down the line, I think, Teddy was talking or something, and he walked in and he goes, oh, Todd, great guy, he'll just, because he's creative, he just walks in, he goes, oh, Teddy, who are you talking to? And then he mentions who he's talking to. And the name that he mentions is that cat who'd passed away before he'd been born.
Oh, wow.
So there you go, a bit of a potentially spooky story there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've included a few people's ghost stories on my show, so that sounds perfect.
Yep, ghost cat. There you go.
Yeah, I love it. I always kind of hope, I think I talked about it in a previous episode or maybe an interview I did at some point, that there have been a few times after my cat died that I kind of like thought that maybe I'd had a weird ghostly interaction, just like finding stuff left around the house that had no other explanation of why it would be there type thing. So I'm all for ghost cats. Love it.
So what is the history of the show then?
So the history of the show, I've been doing it for a little over a year now, and basically why I decided to start doing it, there were a couple different reasons. So I've been listening to podcasts obsessively since like 2018, because that's when I got into a job where I was at a desk and needed entertainment during the day. It was kind of a solitary job a lot of the time. So I found podcasters, like listening to podcasts, and the people that were hosting them almost became like my work time friends in a way. Like I would look forward to hearing those familiar voices at work. And so I just loved podcasts, kind of considered, oh, it could be fun to do one myself. And then also I'm very big on like positive mental health stuff. I work in kind of a stressful job. And so one day my coworkers and I were like brainstorming about ideas on how to not let work stress, go over into your personal life. And I'm kind of known for like kind of being the jokester of the group at work and telling, crazy.
Your sound has gone.
I think it just came back. It said there was a feedback loop. I'm sorry about that.
So let's reiterate what you were saying, then go back to what you're saying. Yep.
Sure. So one day at work, my coworkers and I were kind of brainstorming ideas on how to not let the work stress seep over into our personal lives. And kind of from my history in the office of telling jokes and telling stories to my coworkers at lunch, one of my coworkers actually said, "I think you'd be great at hosting a podcast." And I was like, well, it's funny you say that, because I had actually been considering it. So that kind of gave me the motivation that I needed to actually sit down and think of an idea. Where I got the idea from is really the two things in life that I really love the most, which are holidays and then weird stuff. So whether it's, kind of my alternative gothic type side, or just liking the strange and unusual, usually in any category, whether it's music, movies, clothes, like the vanilla boring side has never really been my thing. I always kind of have an edge if I can. And so I was kind of like, okay, let's combine those two elements and create Holidays After Dark, which is a name that I believe I thought of in the shower one day.
Best ideas.
Exactly, my prime thinking space. So then once I had the basic concept, I worked on it over the course of a few months before I actually released the first episode, because I really had no idea what I was doing as far as getting a microphone, distribution, putting the whole show together. So then after a few months of planning, I started with Valentine's Day in 2020. I'm sorry, in 2022. Okay. 2020 is too long ago. But yes, Valentine's Day of 2022.
It feels like a long time sometimes, but then it doesn't in other ways.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Sometimes I feel like, oh man, I feel like I've been doing this for years and years. And then I'm like, oh no, this is, only the second Mother's Day episode that I wrote, or only the second whatever St. Patrick's Day or whatever the holiday is. But yeah, it makes it that much more exciting because I know I have that much more ahead of me. So no plans to stop.
So you've so far had 2 lots of Valentine's, 2 lots of Mardi Gras, I'm guessing as well.
I actually did not do a Mardi Gras episode last year, so this was the first one. Then that was actually came as a recommendation. One of my listeners said that they would really like to hear a Mardi Gras episode, so I was like, okay, it's not really a holiday that I've ever celebrated much in my personal life, but I really enjoyed learning more about it, and I'm hoping to go to New Orleans for the first time, potentially this year, if not sometime soon. So it definitely got me in the mood to do that.
I'm wondering if I'd rather be at the sidelines watching people celebrate as opposed to being in the midst of thousands of people in a crowd personally.
Oh yeah. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to go to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. I want to go to New Orleans like in the fall or something, just to see Because I've heard that there's a lot of, witchcraft, voodoo. Like I love Salem, Massachusetts, for all the witchcraft stuff. And I've heard that it's kind of like the closest thing you can get to Salem without actually being in Salem. And since I've been to Salem multiple times, I definitely feel like I need to check out New Orleans now.
As much as they've used poetic license in it, factually, one of my favourite Bond films is probably Live and Let Die, where it's got all the voodoo elements and those sort of elements in it, and that's something that attracts me to that film, I think.
Oh, sure. And one of my favorite representations, like you said, there's lots of creative license, but American Horror Story, the Coven season, which took place in New Orleans, and I loved all the historical elements that they used in that too. So yeah, very cool.
So, I mean, really, this what I'm about to say, number two on the list, sort of goes with number six as well. So the choosing of subjects and then the research, and so how do you choose the subjects? What is your research like? And then how do you script the show, essentially?
Sure. So the research is kind of all over the place. I mean, I usually just start with the internet, and I have kind of some search terms that I have found are effective at finding the information that I want, finding ideas. So I'll just, let's say we're talking about 4th of July or Independence Day. I would Google, tragedies that occurred on Independence Day, or weird facts about Independence Day, or and I kind of have it in my head like ahead of time if I want to, do something true crime related, or if I want to focus more on history, or if there's, some sort of ghost story associated with it, or just like a bunch of weird facts about the holiday that no one knew. So I usually kind of have it in my head because I try not to do like, 3 true crime episodes in a row or whatever. I try to switch it up. So I kind of have my base idea. And then, yeah, I just throw in those keywords into my search terms like weird, unusual, tragic, unknown. And then I usually start seeing some stuff on Google, which is a good starting place. I've also used physical books that I already have in my own personal library as research. I have degrees in criminal justice, so I know a lot about true crime. I've been true crime obsessed for years and years. I've also, just due to my love of alternative stuff, for example, when I did my Valentine's Day episode this year about vampires, I had taken a class in college where we actually studied vampires, and I still had the entire book that we used in that class. And so I pulled from that book. And I've pulled from other books as well for other episodes. So yeah, it's mostly online research, like physical in-person research. I always take recommendations from friends, family, listeners, if there's a topic that they think that they'd want to hear. I love it when people send me like a direct link to a story idea, because then I know I'm, doing what the listeners want. And so, yeah, then I just go through and kind of think to myself, what would keep the listeners interested, make my choices of what I'm going to talk about in that episode. And then when I go to script it, I usually do a little split screen on my monitor, and we'll have the research articles pulled up on one half and then a blank document pulled up on the other half. And then I literally just sit there going back and forth between my research articles and my script, and I just type it out, and I try to type it out as close to how I would actually speak, because I try my hardest to not sound like I'm reading from a script, which I feel like I've gotten better at the longer that I do it. But yeah, I just sit there, and then once I've used up all my research, putting it in my own words and whatever, I read through the script a few times, and then I record.
Yep, I was going to go somewhere there, and I forgot completely where I was going to go. What was it with? Yep, number one with the scripting. I have a problem with that where I've had it mentioned to me before when I've actually had something written out exact. Actually, somebody's pointed out to me and said, you do know that you actually sound like you're reading a script. And it's very difficult to make an actual script sound as if it's just natural
Sure.
coming out of you.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's definitely a learned skill. My thing is because just due to just the nature of my life and whatever, I knew that it was going to be a solo show. I haven't even gone into the world of interviews yet. I'm kind of slowly starting to creep that way and coming up with some ideas of people that I would want to interview. But I was kind of afraid that if I just like left myself to my own devices to talk freely with no script, that it might end up being a little bit all over the place or whatever. And so for me, it's what works the best. But yeah, I can absolutely see how it's not always easy.
So, and then from there, you do the recording and editing. How do you do that?
So I do not do any of the editing, thankfully. So my sister has known how to do all that type of stuff for a long time now. It's what, her degrees are in filmmaking, and she knows how to edit sound and video and all that stuff. I honestly don't know the first thing about it. And I'm very glad that I've never had to learn, because I've heard from other podcasters who do all their own editing that it's like the most time consuming part of the process.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do my recording in my little closet that I'm in now. And then as soon as I'm done recording, I go through, I timestamp all the places that I made mistakes and then re-recorded that mistake, so that when she's editing, she can just easily go through to those times and cut them out. And then I send over the music that I would like to use in the episode, and she can insert that wherever she creatively sees fit. And then she sends it back to me when she's done editing it. I listen to it to make sure that I, agree with all the choices and that it sounds good. And then whenever I kind of give it the green flag, then I upload it for release. So yeah, it's thankfully once the scripting and recording is done, my portion is pretty much good to go on it.
I don't want to make anyone envious with this, but the show that I'm going behind the curtain, I get pulling the curtain away again here. The show that I did earlier with Graham Class, who is the chap behind Classic Studios, who does Daily Dad Jokes and all those shows that are AI, basically, they're all AI presented.
Okay.
I've actually finished that episode today and posted it up on my Patreon. And it's the first time I've been able to actually put an episode out with no edits whatsoever.
That's impressive. That's setting a high bar.
I don't think I'll do that again for a long time.
Yeah, it was like your pinnacle of ease, and now it's
all
never
downhill from here.
Exactly. Too funny.
So the show music as well, and the sounds that you have in the background. I mean, were they is that your sister as well that does that? The sources, the music and the sound. You've frozen me. Can you hear me? Hello? Are we back?
Oh, you're back.
We're back. Oh dear. Do you know, I've just jinxed myself by saying that about that episode.
No. You froze like right after you said that. Oh well.
Dear. If I knew how to edit video, that would be perfect. Just put that in as a video out online.
Yeah.
Never jinx yourself. So, what was I going to say? So yeah, is the show music and the sound, any sounds that you have in the background, are they sourced by your sister that does the editing?
No, so I actually find those on a website that I pay a subscription for called Upbeat. It's UPPBEAT. It's a very cheap subscription service, and when you pay that subscription monthly, you then get access to their entire catalog. And it's mostly, I'm under the impression that it's mostly artists who make their music and their sound effects for the intention of putting them on that website. And then I assume they get some sort of back end royalty from the subscription payments. And then in turn, you can use their music without having to worry about copyright issues or anything of that nature. Because that was definitely the one thing that I didn't want to risk, was using, music that some artist would hear it 3 years from now and demand that the episode be removed from existence. So Upbeat is absolutely great. Like I said, it's very cheap, very affordable. And they have tons of really good stuff on there. So I basically just go on and search around and find some options that I think would fit. And then I send it along with the episode recording. And then she, makes the creative choices of where to place the music and which ones to actually use.
Well, it's good that, because then you are using, actually, that was where I was going to go to earlier. You are using your own and your sister's own individual creativity to a really, to a really good level there. So you're doing one form of creativity and your sister's using her creative side to do that side of it as well. So it's a really good marriage of the two of you together.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And I mean, obviously, like, because it is my show and because I obviously don't have the means to pay anyone that helps me out, including her, I do want to take on as much of it as I can. So yeah, I enjoy being able to basically, have a say, contribute, just hopefully make it as easy as possible, since podcasting is not a high paying job.
Well, no, for most people, it's a non-paying job.
Exactly.
Well, you buy a coffee every now and again, and probably, something to eat at a coffee bar, I would have thought.
Oh, yeah. No, it's people definitely, if you're in it for the money, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And then if you are not in it for the money, that's when you'll get enjoyment out of it, is what I believe.
Yep. Pick a subject that you love and just talk about it, and eventually the people will come who are the same as you.
Exactly. If you feel passionate about it, you have to be your own show's number one fan, is kind of how I believe. And if you feel that way about your show, then in due time, other people will too.
But I mean, what is feedback like for your show? Do you get some really good feedback from people? Because I mean, I know that me and yourself are both mutual. We have a mutual friend with the Holly Jolly Ex Masu host. And so, I mean, what is the feedback like? Do you get lots of it, and is it really good feedback?
Yeah, I love getting feedback, and I am lucky enough that I feel like I get a fair amount of it. Not only just from friends and family, which I mean is great. I still love that over, a year into it, I still have people in my personal life who text me after each episode and tell me how they felt about it and what they liked about it, and whatever. So that's always nice. But then also just from strangers too. And then also, like, it's just been such a good way to connect with people. I've been like in various places throughout the country for travel and whatever. And if the podcast comes up in conversation and then they start listening to it, I've actually made some like genuine friends basically from the topic of the podcast. And then they started listening to it. And then we just started chatting from there and kind of developed a friendship. So that's always nice to know that you connected with people over something that you created. And then also some of the best feedback has been like from the other podcasters, like from the podcasting community. I never imagined that people would be so supportive. You kind of think like, oh, is everyone just going to be like, wanting to promote their own show, but not interested in anyone else's, and kind of like a competition or something. But from my experience, it has not been that way at all. Like every podcaster I've ever had a conversation with or been on their show or whatever, it's been nothing but kindness and helpful hints and nice feedback. And just everyone's been so welcoming. So it's been a great community to be a part of, and I love hearing their feedback.
Yeah, it's strange because you could be speaking with people who do a podcast that's similar in some ways, and they're warm and welcoming, and they actually offer advice and are very helpful. And there's none of that there, where you would think that in most other industries, it's competition. It's like two films, Armageddon and Deep Impact, were both about the same subject, and they compete against each other. But in the podcasting world, you don't find that much.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. I thought it was going to be, like you said, if you found someone who was doing a remotely similar topic to you, that they would be like, that's my space. Like, what are you doing competing with me? Like, I already cover this topic. But it's just been really, it's like there's room for all of us, Most of us are just doing this to have fun and have a fun hobby, and because it, maybe helps us in some way in our lives or gives us something productive to do. So it's just nice that there's none of that like petty, like, like you mentioned in Hollywood, like everyone's giving each other the side eye at award shows and stuff. Like, I feel like if there were, big time podcast award shows, it would be a pretty welcoming space.
There are some podcast award shows, but
yeah,
probably not end up going there.
not quite Oscars level, but we'll get there.
We'll get there eventually. We will.
Yes.
What I was going to mention earlier that I remembered that I'd forgotten was when you were talking about different holidays, and you mentioned, 4th of July, Independence Day, and that reminded me of, I heard on another show they were speaking about that, and there's an interesting story there, because essentially 4th of July isn't when the independence actually happened. That's just a date that's given to it. And there's all these little facts about these holidays and these festivities that are really interesting, where when you go to the fact and find out the truth, it's not quite the way that it's put over.
Oh, yeah, you could not be more correct on that. You end up finding that so many of our holidays are kind of arbitrary and kind of like, well, we just picked a day because we needed one, but we actually think that, the historical event happened here, but we don't really know. So we just picked a day sort of thing. Or you just find, something that looks shiny on the surface is actually rooted in tragedy, and maybe we shouldn't celebrate it the way that we do. It definitely makes you question kind of, for example, I have a Cinco de Mayo episode out, and Cinco de Mayo is coming up on Friday, and everyone, at least in the United States, is just all about eating Mexican food and parties and drinking. But if you research the roots of Cinco de Mayo, like I talked about in my episode, it's actually very dark and rooted in war and bloodshed. And even in Mexico, they don't really celebrate it the way that we do, because for them it's a tragic event. So us Americans kind of adopted it and just turned it into an excuse to party. But it definitely makes you reconsider some things.
It's strange looking at it from the outside, actually, Cinco de Mayo, because it's a bit like a cross between Halloween and Mardi Gras. In a sense, it almost looks like that. I don't know if that's what it's actually like itself.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because of you see a lot of like the Day of the Dead type masks come out, and all the colors and decorations and costumes. And I mean, in its essence, it's not really that similar to Halloween, but I can absolutely see on the surface, it kind of looks that way. So yeah, it's that was one of the most interesting ones to research, because I was like, wow. And also people think that it's Mexican Independence Day, which that's not the case at all either. So that comes in like September or October, I think. So we have it all wrong here.
Yeah, history, people don't understand it sometimes.
Yeah.
So then the show, the artwork for the show that comes as like the little, when you put the show on the player and you have this artwork, how did that come about? Is that yourself?
No, so that's also from my sister. She created that before my first episode ever came out, because I definitely wanted to go into it with, a set logo so that people would maybe start having some recognition of it from day one. So that was literally just her. I don't remember if she used Photoshop or what exact tool that she used. But I kind of had come up with some baseline ideas, some things I wanted to include. I wanted it to have elements of multiple holidays, but then also have a little bit of an edginess to it, of course, because of the theme of the show. So I sent some, sample images of inspiration that I thought she could pull from. And then she actually whipped that up. Like, I think that was like the first one that she ever sent me. And I was like, wow, this is pretty much
Wow.
perfect. And then with a little bit of tweaking, I'm thinking about getting shirts made soon. It's long overdue. I've had a few people ask for them over the past year. So that's kind of my next endeavor. But yeah, it's that again, I can't take any credit for that. It's a skill that I don't really know. I definitely would have had to like hire it out otherwise or something. But yeah, that's how that came to be.
So, are there any hidden tales or things around around holidays that have really intrigued you and have really stood out among all those that you've talked about so far?
Sure. So a couple are I loved learning more about La Befana, the Christmas witch.
Yeah.
I had always kind of heard of her, but I enjoyed being able to read more about it and like kind of how it brings in elements of Halloween themes to Christmas time. And just kind of how different, countries, different regions have different interpretations of her. And in some areas, like she's actually depicted as being quite scary, which I can appreciate. So I loved being able to include that. That was like a day one idea for me, waiting to the Christmas season to talk about. Also, another episode, I talked about a true story about a guy. It was on my Santa Swindler episode, which came out, I believe, in November, early December of this past year. I think it was my first Christmas episode. This real life guy who basically, ran this charity in New York City, kind of posing as Santa Claus and claiming to be this huge, charity driven guy and wanted to help the children. But it turns out he was just a complete con artist and was scamming everyone over. And that was drawn from a book that I had read years ago called The Santa Claus Man. And I still have it on my shelf. And then I was just trying to think of Christmas ideas and it just struck me. And I was like, oh my God, that's perfect. And so that's one of my like favorite, even though it's not necessarily the happiest story, but I just New York in that era and how the whole thing worked and, people's view of the Santa Claus thing and wanting to do good. But then ultimately, because of this one guy, it kind of all got ruined and whatever. So that was one of my favorite things to talk about as well.
It's almost as though when you started the show back in February of last year, it's almost as though, and I don't know if this is right or not, but it's almost as though as you were going throughout the year, you were looking forward to the Halloween to Christmas period because you had all these ideas because they're the two favorites of yours, seasons of yours or holidays. Did you already have those ideas well ahead of those times and you would just add all those ideas, like I said, ahead of time?
Oh, absolutely. And that was the only bad thing, or at least bad thing to me at the time, is when I thought of the podcast idea was in like November of 21. And so I was like, okay, it's too late now. By the time I, get all the equipment and figure out what I'm doing and get my domain name and everything that I had to do in preparation, it's going to be too late. I'm not just going to rush and push out something just for the sake of doing it. So I knew that based on the timing that those episodes would be almost a full year out. So yeah, like from day one, I had notes of, okay, I'm going to talk about this at Halloween. I'm going to talk about this at Christmas. And then I just kind of set it aside. And then thankfully, when I started writing those episodes later in the year, I had all these pre-built ideas. But in another way, I think it was for the better because it gave me, 8 to 9 months of like practice, basically. And not that I consider all of those episodes to be practice. I mean, I do hope that they're good on their own. I do like that by the time I got into the heavy hitters per se, that I had already been doing it, maybe built up like a little bit of a following. And then, my Halloween and Christmas episodes were the most successful ones that I've done so far by far, which I kind of figured because a lot of people you have to be a pretty big holiday enthusiast to want to talk about holidays all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like in the Halloween and Christmas seasons, people who ignore holidays the rest of the year finally get into it then. So it was an expected spike, but it was also a welcome spike just because I can't get enough of all that, the holiday stuff around then.
It's funny because so I've spoken with Scott from Holly Jolly Xmasu. I've spoken with Wayne, who does the Christmas alphabet, and he's not been on my show, but I've had chats with Brian Earl, who does Christmas Past, and they've all said that even though they do shows that come out throughout the year, it's that period they're saying where suddenly they'll get an enormous spike because it's the festive season. So they get the same sort of thing as you do, where suddenly you'll get a lot more listens in that, say, November, December, and the first couple of weeks of January will be enormous in comparison with the rest of the year.
Absolutely. And Christmas Past, with Brian Earl was one of my original holiday podcasts that I started listening to. Absolutely fantastic and definitely a big inspiration for me. And then, yeah, Scott is amazing. And I've included one of his ghost stories on one of my episodes. And what's nice about the holiday season spike is that I then did see, that some of those listeners then have continued listening. And even though it does drop, a little bit, it is nice to see that not everyone said, okay, bye, now the season is over, I'm never going to listen to you again. Like, some people out of that group are actually appearing to make the effort to continue listening. So I greatly appreciate that.
I'd like to think that they also went back and listened to the shows that were not just about Christmas and the New Year and that sort of Thanksgiving and that sort of era.
Yeah, and I think I can see some evidence of that too. So that's also very much welcomed. And like I said, I want to entertain people all year, even if we are just kind of counting the days until the good parts.
Yep. So this next bit that I've got, I think I've got a bit poetic with this what I've put, because I put the darkness and the light. And the whole thing is that what I love about it is that you're looking at a lot of seasons can be seen as light because it's like a time for people to get together, this and all this and the other. But there's something really, dare I say, fun and entertaining about looking at almost the darker side of these periods in the year, these seasons. And that's what your show really goes into in a big way, is that, that is it. And that's why I put the darkness and the light. But yeah, there is a certain, dare I say, fun element to looking into those areas.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I'm a big believer in life that not to get too deep, but I do believe that you have to have opposites. Like, you can't feel true happiness without sadness. You can't see the true light of something without also looking at the darkness, because nothing exists in a vacuum. Nothing is one-sided. No matter how shiny and bright and happy something might seem on the surface, there's a guarantee that there's something underneath that is quite different from that. And so that's what I wanted to do with the holidays, because, I feel like so many times with holidays, people just, are on their best behavior. They wear their best clothes. Like, okay, let's not cause any family drama, even if we all hate each other, like that kind of stuff. And so it's kind of like taking away that facade that we see on holidays, which I get it. There's a time and place and a reason why we do that. And it's, I love all of those elements too. I love the happy and the cute and whatever, but I like seeing the depth within something, because then those holidays are more complex. They have more meaning. They're more interesting. So even if it's talking about, a triple, quadruple homicide that happened on Easter, it's like, well, that's the reality of someone's Easter.
Yeah.
Did they want that? No one wants that. But it is something to always keep in mind, when the rest of us are having our happy meals with our families on the holiday, there are, events occurring in the world that maybe aren't so happy. And to me, it just makes me that much more grateful for, the good holidays and appreciative of the good things. But then also, yeah, just on a lighter note, because I just love weird stuff and I love reading about, crazy things, or, oh my God, I can't believe that actually happened, or, the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Like, I didn't know there was a New Year's Day massacre, but it turns out there was. And so,
Yep.
I can't change history. So I feel like the least that we can do is, study it and learn about it and learn from it, and have a little fun with it in the meantime.
But there are times, I'm trying to think what do we call it, but there's certain times where you have events that people look at or take part in. It's a bit like when I can't remember what do we, it's completely lost. I've completely lost what it's called now. But we have something in this country or something where we look back to people who fell. Was it the Battle of the Somme or whatever with the poppies? And so we have, but we have that. But what that is essentially is it's a day where you look at those people who gave themselves, and that's the reason why we are in the situation we are now. They took us past this awful thing that was going on, this battle, this war, and all these things, and it makes us think of people. It's added to now. They've got people. They make you think of people who died in World War I, World War II, and all the wars essentially. And it's to almost give tribute to those people that gave of themselves and sacrificed themselves to make us into the world that we are now, that is, but for want of but in some ways much better than the world that it was back then. And it's difficult talking about this with things going on in the Ukraine, etc., because that's awful and all these things. But it's a world
Absolutely.
that they're essentially giving themselves to try and make the world better than it was before.
Sure. Yeah. And it sounds a lot like our Memorial Day, which, that's also a very deep contrast of, honoring those who have given their lives for the betterment of the country and trying to, uphold the better, the good that their sacrifice did bring to the country. But then also, taking a day off work and enjoying time with people that you care about and having a little fun, but also keeping it in the back of your head that, a lot of this came from a lot of tragedy, but we'll honor you by enjoying the benefits that we see from your sacrifice.
Yeah, it's the whole thing of what you were saying, where you need it's almost like a scale. So you need the darkness sometimes in life because otherwise, if everything was at this level up here and you're always like that, it'd all be the same. And in some ways, would it be a bit boring? Maybe if you were always at this level, it'd be all the same all the time. So you need sometimes these lower periods for those periods where there's extreme joy to actually make its mark. Essentially, that's why in life you have these things that you remember, and that's why these things are so important.
Oh, absolutely. And I definitely can fall into that trap either when I'm on, like a great vacation, or even around like the Christmas time of just wishing, I wish this would just last forever. I wish this was my daily life. But it's like, if that was daily life, I would not appreciate it the way that I do now. It's like you have to have the mundane in order to have the exhilarating and the things that you spend all year craving and longing for. So take the good with the bad, and it makes you appreciate the good even more.
It does. So what are your favorite traditions?
So with all holidays baseline, I'm a huge decorator. I have decor of some sort, for pretty much every holiday, even tiny ones like St. Patrick's Day and Easter, and for like, the patriotic holidays like Memorial Day and Independence Day and stuff. So I love, making my apartment feel like the holiday because it just gets me in the mood. The traditions are obviously holiday specific. On the 4th of July, that's always been like a family gathering day. I have a family member whose birthday was on the 4th of July. And so it was always, a birthday party, watching fireworks. For Halloween, I love going to like a haunted house is always great. On the actual day of Halloween, even though, I'm too old to trick or treat now, at least so the rules say, I do enjoy just like going for a walk, like through a neighborhood that, is bustling with trick or treaters, just, seeing everyone's costumes, seeing how excited the kids are. And of course, I have a lineup of movies that I try to watch each Halloween season, either some new horror movies or some of my classics that I go to year after year. And then with Christmas, I love, decorating my tree. I love going to drive-through light displays. I love baking all sorts of holiday cookies and other things that I only eat around that time of year. But yeah, ultimately it all just comes down to, being with people that you care about and making those traditions and doing things together. And I'm definitely a very routine-based person. So I'm, one of those people where like, okay, if I don't, decorate a gingerbread house this year, it's not going to feel like Christmas. So I have to decorate the gingerbread house. So that kind of stuff never gets boring to me, but I love pretty much all of it.
That's great. So have we already touched on this, like standout episode or a standout moment? I think you might have mentioned this with the seasonal tales, but we'll still see if there's anything that you really want to put out there for people to check out episode wise.
Yeah, so I do think I kind of touched on a little bit, but of course it never hurts to reiterate. But I think my two favorite ones that I've put out so far is my Bloodthirsty Valentine, which is the Valentine's Day episode I did this year about vampires. I just thought it was really fun. I loved talking about it. I love, that kind of stuff, vampire culture, just learning about, how it relates to society and why we're so obsessed with vampires. And then also the Santa Swindler episode that I did about the Santa Claus man, I think that's my most successful podcast episode to date. And I loved it even before it became the most successful one. But I just thought it was a really great topic and such a great book that I was happy to be able to promote it in some way. So yeah, those are probably the two that stand out. But even going back to like some of I'll still go back and listen to like, my first ever episode about the St. Valentine's Day massacre and stuff, just because I still enjoy it. So yeah, those two are probably my favorites.
I'm going to look at my my feed now and see if any jump out at me that I really, really enjoyed. Because I've listened to a lot of episodes so far.
Well, thank you.
That's okay. So I've listened to them all from when you started in February of last year. And the most recent one I listened to was the one I mentioned. So I've listened to a year's worth of shows. Right, get out of unplayed. I'm going to have to edit this. There you go. I've jinxed myself now. So what ones have jumped out at me? Yeah, the origins of Earth Day. That was fascinating. That's from back in April of last year.
Yeah, that was one of my, and I didn't do an Earth Day episode this year, so that's my go-to Earth Day. But again, I feel like it's one of those kind of forgotten like holidays, I guess. I mean, I guess it is a holiday, but it has a much like deeper meaning behind it. It's not, not a traditional holiday that people are like decorating for and stuff, but with climate change and things like that, I thought it was a very relevant thing to talk about.
Yep, I will always be intrigued in episodes that are about Krampus, and your episode about Krampus was fantastic as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that was such a good fun movie to watch. So I always knew about Krampus, but I had never really dove into it, like even just from learning about the origins of the story and stuff on my own. So that was super fun.
And yeah, it's Remembrance Day. That's what we have. Remembrance Day. That's what I was talking about with the poppies and
Okay.
that. Yeah, just suddenly that's come to mind. Trick or Terror at Halloween. That was Santa Swindler. Anybody interested? That's the 1st of November 2022. That episode.
Okay, yeah. I forgot it was that early, but yeah, that's right.
And yes, the Family Feud as well. That was was it the
The
Hatfields
Hatfield.
and the McCoys?
Yes.
Yep,
Yes.
that
That's
as
the
well. That
one. The New Year's Day massacre that I was not aware of, so I thought that was quite fascinating too.
well, there is this. Is it a television series, the Hatfields and the McCoys?
Yeah, I think there was a television series, and I forget what network it was on. And I never really saw much of it, but I had just always, heard about the family. I think there was like a restaurant around here called the Hatfields and the McCoys at some point. And so I think it was just always kind of like a part of my general knowledge of history, but I didn't really know that much about the ordeal between the two families. So I feel much more informed now.
The way you told it, it's almost like the Romeo and Juliet story in a sense, where you've got wasn't the one of the was it the girl from one of the families was dating or married to a man from
Correct.
the other family or something, which had a
Yep.
very, very Shakespearean Romeo and Juliet feel to it.
Oh, absolutely. Like, and almost like when I read that, I like felt the need to double check that with like multiple sources, because at first
Yeah.
I was like, that seems too juicy to be true, like too good to be true for my purposes. But it turns out it was true. So I'm like, man, that's no wonder they turned it into so many different, shows, movies, whatever, because that's like stuff you can't make that up.
No, well, obviously no, because it was real.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to anybody if they wanted to start their own podcast?
So the advice I would give is definitely like do your homework and plan. I wouldn't just like plop yourself down and start in front of a microphone and start talking. I mean, if you have that talent to improv that much, like more power to you, but definitely, come up with a solid concept and idea and kind of know the path that you picture your show going down, because you don't want to get into it and then 2 months in you feel like you've talked about everything and don't know where to go with it in the future. So definitely take your time, plan things out. I would rather listen to 6 great episodes a year as opposed to like 2,000 mediocre ones. So definitely like quality over quantity, I would say.
Yeah.
And then also just like I mentioned earlier, I think like be your own biggest fan. Like listen to your own episodes once they're out on Spotify or whatever platforms you use. And if you find yourself not wanting to listen to it for some reason, then maybe you should question why that is. And if you don't want to listen to it, why would other people want to listen to it? So I think it's an important thing to keep in mind that you have to, at the end of like, first and foremost, you have to entertain yourself and enjoy what you're talking about. And then people will be able to sense that, I think, of, oh, she really enjoys this. And, this is what she wants to be doing, he or she. And they will in turn then enjoy it as much as you do. But yeah, definitely don't underestimate the amount of work that that goes into it. Like, I know, and I'm sure many podcasters can relate, I always feel like there's something that I could be doing, whether it's promotion, researching, script writing, looking for music. I mean, there's never a week that goes by where I'm like, oh, I didn't do anything with the podcast this week. Like, it's definitely basically a part-time, unpaid job.
Yeah, definitely a job. That's true. But like you said, if you're enjoying it, and that's really good advice, actually, that you listen to your own show. And like you said, if you're listening to it and you find yourself drifting off, it's like take notes and think to yourself, why am I drifting off? What is it that I don't like about my own show? And how can I change it to make myself interested in it more? And then that builds the show in a sense.
Absolutely. And I think a great way to do your homework in advance is just listen to as many podcasts as you can, because you can pull other people's, ideas of the formats that they use, the way they talk about things. And obviously you're not setting out to copy other people's work, but I came up with the format and like having the scripted show from listening to other scripted podcasts and seeing how they did it. So listen to podcasts and you'll get some inspiration.
Absolutely. So where can people find you and get hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Holidays Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, and then Facebook. If you just search Holidays After Dark, it comes up. I also have a website, www.holidaysafterdark.com. I also love if people email me ideas or direct message me. So email is Kristin, Kristin, at holidaysafterdark.com. But yeah, I feel like I'm pretty out there and reachable. And I always love when people reach out either to give feedback or, like I said, send ideas of stuff to talk about or, even to collaborate or for me to listen to their show too, because I'm always looking for new podcasts. So
you will always get a response from Kristin on the social networks. If you contact her, she's very quick at responding and very friendly.
I pretty much live on social media for better or worse anyway, I feel like. And I've pretty much, just switched over to all my podcast pages and that's where I hang out now. And like I said, people are just so great to interact with that I absolutely love hearing from people and talking to people.
That's great. Anyway, you can find Pods Like Us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and we are available. Well, I'm available on podslikeus@gmail.com. Anyway, thank you for speaking with me today, Kristin.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited that we got to do this finally. I'm a big fan, and I can't wait to see more of what you do.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Awesome. Yes, sounds good.
That's good. That's good. As soon as you started talking, it's like listening to an episode.
Thanks. Yeah. Welcome to my walk-in closet. It's my recording space because I live in a one-bedroom apartment and it has the best acoustics. So
maybe I should try doing it in the closet as opposed to this back bedroom that's been turned into a studio/office space.
Yeah, I like the artwork, but the only thing that sucks is I have to tear everything down and set it back up every time I record, just because I don't have the space to keep everything up in my closet all the time, because then I wouldn't be able to get in here, but it works.
Well, to tear away the curtain, underneath my laptop at the moment is my electronic keyboard, which is like a full-size keyboard for doing music.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I brought that out of storage, I don't have a space now to put my laptop onto.
Okay.
So it's leaning. That's why you've got this strange angle, because it's leaning on top of the keyboard, and I'm waiting to get like one of those shelves that you can clamp onto a desk.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense, but that's okay. It works for now.
Yeah, it's a shame that you have to keep doing that every time that you finish the show. So is it almost like straight away, or must clear the closet and use it for what it's supposed to be used for?
Yeah, no, it works. I'm currently house hunting, so hopefully when I get into an actual house, I'll have my plan is to turn one bedroom into a dedicated podcast space, put up some acoustic panels, whatever. So yeah, we'll see, but the housing market is still crazy, so
very expensive everywhere.
Oh yeah, so one day.
Yeah. If you win the lottery, you might have your own area to have a big studio with lots of different booths.
Right. Fingers crossed.
And then have guests in each booth.
Yeah, that would be great.
But it's strange, when you see these podcasters actually have their guest there with them. They visit their own home studio essentially. These guests.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, that's like big time in my book because I'm so far from that. But that's how you know you made it.
There you go, Gil from the Mind Buzz. You've made it.
Yeah,
because he has people with him now at home.
Sure.
So I've not posted it yet, but I did listen to another episode on Monday night. I'm in the midst of getting the blog together for it. What have we got? Let's have a look. Give you a bit of a heads up. What was it? Arnold's apparition. So it was about the Mardi Gras.
Yes. I appreciate your support so much, and I always love seeing your posts. And but yeah, I always greatly appreciate it.
Well, it's like an extension in a sense of the podcast, where it's to introduce people to shows that they might not have heard of before and be looking for a show about that subject.
Right. No, I think it's such a cool and unique idea. And it can be, obviously one of the hardest parts of podcasting can be getting your name out there. So it's great to have someone like you who's taking it upon themselves to promote other people's work, because it's very selfless, but very much needed. So I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say that we appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. But yeah, the idea that I've said it before with people, I don't know whether I've put it in the show before and said this, but the idea is that lots of people do shows like mine to a degree where it's a podcast about podcast. But
Sure.
With me, what I'm trying to do is we get all the technical, but then I always try to delve into the subject matter so that that way it's like a soft introduction to that person's show, essentially.
Sure.
That's the idea of that.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's a good idea, because then that's how you can kind of get people hooked and make them want to listen to the show or whatever, instead of just saying very surface level. But yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, because there's all sorts of shows that look into the darker side of life. But a lot of these shows, it's like I said to someone the other day, I said, if you go online and you look for a podcast about films,
Sure.
you can throw a stone in the river and 1 million, or probably an exaggeration, but there are that many of those sort of shows that it's who those people are that are presenting the show and how they look at that subject that makes it different to all the other shows.
Oh, absolutely. No, I've been checking out your show ever since I saw your first post when you started posting about mine. And I was like, well, of course I need to check it out, because I just thought it was such a cool idea. And yeah, it definitely is a great way to kind of get a synopsis, because I think people finding podcasts on their own is sometimes hard, because it's like, where do you start? Like you have an idea in your head of something that you want to listen to, but then unless it's very searchable, it's kind of an abstract thing to actually accomplish finding that podcast. So that's a great, like, more direct way to be like, oh, what he's talking about is something that I wanted to listen to. So now let me go. It's a direct link.
Yeah, I mean, what I could do, actually, I'm thinking thinking out of the top of my head now. What I could do now that I have 125, 126 episodes in the can, I could start looking at the different subjects that I've looked into, and perhaps do something on my website where then I could put different subjects and say, this is where I've had guests who do shows about these subjects, and then have something on the website that does that. Maybe that might be an idea.
Oh, that would be absolutely fantastic, like an encyclopedia of podcasts. And I think it would be so helpful to so many people who are into listening to them.
I'm giving myself work now when I'm already out for 72 hours a week working. So. yeah, I don't know what else. So you think the points are okay? The points that I've put, and then I've got these little
Yeah.
bits at the side.
Yeah, I thought it looked good. I took a few notes so that when we're discussing, some stuff comes to my mind. But yeah, I thought it was well put together and happy to talk about all of that.
Okay, right. Let's get on with it then. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
You gave me an idea while you were saying something earlier.
Oh yeah, what's that?
So when October comes, I've only just thought this. I'm going to try and get a group together to have a chat, and we'll chat about films that we think people should watch for Halloween.
I absolutely love it, and I'm 100% on board. I've done a few group podcast recordings now, and I thought it was so fun. And yeah, absolutely count me in.
Okay. Anyway, it's now, I'd speak for longer, but it's now 20 to 2 in the morning in the
Oh,
UK.
I know. I feel so bad.
It's okay.
But I appreciate you accommodating my schedule, and yeah, get some sleep.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kristin. You take care.
All right, you as well.
Thank
See
you.
ya.
Bye.